Hey everyone, it's LS, and this is the patch 8.2 notes rundown, so let's just get right into it. First up is Echo. He gets some bonus attack speed now, and they're talking about how he's pretty close to being able to jungle effectively. Last time they buffed Echo, there was a short period of time where there were a lot of people playing him inside of the jungle. I think that with this change, in addition to another change that we're going to see later on to the patch notes that comes to the Runic Echo's jungle item, I think that it does potentially aid him out in becoming, one of the more mainstream AP junglers. Right now, for the most part, it's almost only Elise and Evelynn in solo queue. And then obviously you have Sejuani and Gragas, but I'm not really classifying them as true AP junglers in the sense that they offer enormous amounts of damage. They're more so tanky and utility, so I like the change that Echo's getting. I do agree that I don't think that the 10% is going to drastically affect his laning phase, and I don't think there's any possibility that like Tank Echo comes back in top lane, so this change isn't going to hit him there. Next champion up on the list is Evelynn. Her E damage got decreased, so 4% of the target's mass health to 3%, and then she also loses a little bit on the ability power ratio. So at the end of the day, I truly question if Evelynn was really the problem, or if people being familiar with Evelynn and remembering how to play around her is actually the problem, and if she just needed a little bit more time inside of the limelight before people would know how to play around her, and then she would end up actually needing the damage. It makes sense that they're taking a pretty light nerf. This isn't going to cause Eve to be completely unusable, but I just question if the nerf comes a little bit too soon. I have heard that she's causing chaos. Usually she's causing chaos against people that are inexperienced with playing against her, and also they tend to be facing people that are experienced with the champion. And so when those two things collide, it really makes me hesitant to talk about if a nerf is really just or not. And also, again, you have to consider what is it doing inside of solo queue and competitive, which is something that I factor in when I'm looking at nerfs and buffs to champions and stuff. So I think this is fine. It's a pretty soft approach, and I don't think it's gonna impact Eve for why she is becoming popular right now. Next up on the list is Ezreal. Q damage decreased at early ranks. So basically, the way that you look at this, the level 1 poke potential on the Q Mystic shot is hit pretty hard. You end up losing basically an auto attack until you hit level 2 or something, maybe with the poke in lane. It heavily impacts level 1 and 2 as long as the opponent is actually dodging spells and whatnot. So with that being said, I mean, by the time that you're level 5, Ezreal is going to be completely fine. I mean, the damage for the most part is restored, and there are going to be some instances where you do end up losing out on trades now, missing that extra 10 that racks up if you hit a few mystic shots inside of an extended trade or inside of a gank, but it's not enough to put him in the ground, and then obviously he gets all his power back at rank 5. However, with another change that is present inside of this patch with the Kleptomancy, it's a little bit bizarre how they're taking so many different approaches to hitting Ezreal, when I think that honestly throughout the last 2 months or so that he came back into power and a lot of people were picking him. I think that a lot of answers have been starting to pop up. He is still pretty overtuned, but I truly do wonder if the Kleptomancy nerf, which we're going to get to later down in this rundown, is actually just too much to knock him out. But it really depends on what exactly is the drop rate and how does it affect his ramp into his first 2 items. But for the most part, this is okay. It's not completely unacceptable. The only time where you're really, really going to feel this is at level 1 and 2, and that's if you're really spamming a lot of Qs and hitting them, and if the opponent's just not dodging them and they're basically a magnet. At level 3, or 3 points in it, so level 5, you're not really going to notice that much of a difference inside of the trades, so in that sense it's okay. Next up is Jinx. So they lowered her base attack damage, and they gave her some more attack damage growth stat, and then her passives get mixed up a lot, where now she can actually exceed the cap while she is excited, and then the switcheroo, she gets a little bit more attack speed now on the minigun. So Jinx is in an interesting place, and the reason that I say this is because I am of the opinion that Kog'Maw is in a much better place than people are giving him credit for right now. And I don't think that he's getting as much attention as he does deserve, especially with how the meta is shaping out elsewhere on the map and like what type of champions are in the games. I was having a conversation with a player yesterday, and I talked about how in a weird spot or in a weird turn of events, Kog'Maw has actually become a champion that almost seemingly goes into every composition in a way. Whereas normally he used to only fit into very particular compositions, and now it actually is shaping up in competitive anyway, where Ezreal and Kalista, who are two of the most popular AD carries, are almost being directed into very specific team compositions. And it's kind of weird how that flip-flops occurred, where normally before Kalista, Ezreal, they go into everything. And I mean, they still both can go into everything, but I think that generally when they do tend to show up in competitive, and even when they tend to show up very effectively inside of like higher MMR games, it tends to be sculpted inside of a proper team composition that really makes use of their itemization spikes. And I think Kog'Maw and Varus, for instance, get around that. Jinx is another champion that I think that if the meta continues to stagnate and be the way that it is, Jinx is a champion that potentially has viability. So we'll probably talk more on that later, further down the line. So I like the changes that she has received. So all in all, pretty good there. Kha'Zix, passive scaling decreased, Q scaling increased. So the unseen threat bonus attack damage has gone down by 0.2, and then the Taste of the Fear goes up by 0.1. So in the end, it's not really a big change. I think that Kha'Zix, he's getting a lot of love right now, I think, in every region for the most part. And in solo queue, he is being seen. But I think that Kha'Zix will probably end up experiencing a similar thing that happened to him last year, where eventually he gets figured out, and other champions just eventually crop up, and they just basically cast a shadow on Kha'Zix. So the changes I think are okay. You're not really losing out on too much, and I think that it's a pretty soft approach, and I like when Riot at least just takes soft approaches rather than completely gimping someone. Now, speaking about completely gimping someone, Malzahar just continues to get the short end of the stick across the board. Malzahar's burst combo is a bit too consistent, so we're lessening its frequency and overall damage. So he loses a 0.15 ability power ratio on his Q. He's not really being picked for his ability to just dish out tons of damage and stuff. He's mostly being picked because his utility is insane, his ramp is insane, and he's one of the very few champions in the game that doesn't slow down. But when you just continue to nerf him over and over, it really just, it leaves you feeling a little bit sad when you watch all the patch notes that involve him. Is it going to knock him out of the meta or anything? No, it's not. Nether Grasp, the change is going to be felt, obviously, until you hit rank 2. But this is also, I think, considering the way that Malzahar takes his runes right now, the way that he itemizes, it's only going to be felt for maybe the first or second gank that you offer up to a Malzahar or something as a jungler. But outside of that, he's going to return to basically doing what he does exactly like right now, and just have a little bit less oomph to his Q, which, I mean, that's an important thing to take notice of when you consider the mid lane meta and how the team compositions operate right now, because Malzahar's ability to wiggle in and out of team fights and casting Qs at long range really can actually dictate the pace, especially because he's been shaping up to be one of the resistances to some of the very popular competitive team compositions right now. So the nerfs are obviously a little bit sad to see, but I don't think it's not gonna knock him out of his current status in mid, nor in solo queue or competitive. Now we talk about Nunu. This is just really weird. This is just really, really strange. Well-Fed now grants 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 plus 5 per 100 ability power magic damage on basic attacks. So it's obviously going to help with his clear speed. It's going to help with his ability to solo neutrals. And, obviously it helps his ganks quite a lot. And then here's the kicker. Blood Boil now additionally grants ability power by 40%. Max increase 40, 60, 80, 100, 120. on both targets. So it has a cap on it, but it's still just ridiculous. Being able to give your mid laner a free blasting wand early, or being able to give them a needlessly large rod, or basically just give them an entire item almost in terms of just raw stats is going to really shape up the meta. Nunu's going to come back for sure. He's also going to probably cause mid and top lane to get mixed up a little bit. And with so many AP mid laners that they just have so much insane damage right now, and a lot of them even benefit and like utility. I mean, obviously one that comes to mind is going to be Azir. Azir is going to love the new Blood Boil. It's just really, really strange to see this. It's I don't even know what to think about this, but... Okay, so this is one of those extreme changes that I don't really know how this gets through the PBE. I don't even know if this was on the PBE. I actually don't tend to keep track of that too much. So, Nunu's back. Hope that, all you guys enjoy that. Ornn is no longer unstoppable during W. R cooldown increased. So, let's talk about his initial R. The initial R at rank 1 when he's looking to make plays is not really affected. At rank 2, maybe there's a slight impact when Ornn hits level 11. He's looking to make plays mid-game, mid to late transition. But the first one is irrelevant, the 10 seconds added on to it. He's not one of those champions that when his ult is off cooldown that you're like, okay, we have to do something now. Like this is, imperative that we get something done during these 10 seconds or something. And then obviously the rank 3 one is interesting because the rank 3 one, I think, makes it so that if you end up botching it during a Baron standoff or a siege, or trying to just have a team fight somewhere in the map, really late game when Ornn's at max CDR or something, this means that they can't just dance around for a little bit and then it's back up again very soon. Typically in very long, extended Elder Dragon, late game Dragon, or Baron team fights, Ornn can actually get his ultimate off twice. It's pretty rare, but I think this is going to make it so that it's not possible. The change to Bellows Breath, or no longer being unstoppable during it, is kind of sad. It removes a lot of counterplay that better players can use to get out of sticky situations, makes it a lot easier to gank him. And I don't think that Ornn is shaping up to, or he's not the monster that people think that he is after some of the changes that have happened to him in recent patches. So I don't really think that this change entirely was necessary. I think that maybe attacking just his passive in some manner, or attacking just his sustain inside of the lane would have been better. I don't think that attacking the Bellows Breath was the best move that they could have made, but we'll end up we'll see what ends up happening. This only affects his ability to basically be ganked in the early stages. Late game, yeah, there's going to be some impacts, but if Ornn's going to die, he's going to die to a jungler gank, because most of the champions that you pick into Ornn, the Bellows Breath change isn't going to put a damper into him. So, Pantheon. So I know someone who's probably excited, but no. A lot of people are saying this is a gigantic buff, but with the change that happened to targeted spell abilities that we're going to get to later on in this rundown, I don't think that this change is actually that big. It's a nice little novelty, but Pantheon's not going to come back magically into the meta or anything like that, especially when we address the later change. Still think that he's a solo queue pub stomp champion, especially at lower MMRs and still in the jungle. I think he's just particularly good in solo queue. So that's pretty much it. Sona, Q mana cost decrease, so she gets a little bit more spam ability inside of her laning phase, but Sona historically has basically been a champion that is picked to counter certain team compositions or certain lane dynamics, and I do not think that this type of a change is going to magically make her shift into becoming a viable champion pick. So I think that Sona will continue just being pretty rare and specific champion whenever you guys do see her. Vayne change, attack speed per level decreased, R bonus attack damage decreased. So she's losing a longsword at rank 1, and then she's losing 2 longswords at rank 2, and then, she's losing a longsword or half a longsword and a pickaxe at the final rank, which, that's pretty big. These are pretty harsh nerfs to her R. Obviously, it doesn't impact her outside of that, but the attack speed growth going down as well by 0.7 is a little bit weird too. I feel like this is too fast of a change. I would have liked to have seen the meta stabilize a little bit more, especially because I think there are 80 carries that just aren't being tapped into enough, or that they're not getting the attention that they deserve. And I think that Vayne is honestly in an okay spot. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that. She is particularly strong right now, but I also think that it was attributed to some other factors that don't pertain to her herself, and we're going to talk to that. We're going to talk about that also later on inside of this. So let's just move down and go into the items. Enchantment Runic Echoes, missing mana restore, 15% to 25%. Talked about this for Echo. Obviously also helps Elise, it helps Evelynn, but truthfully, people that can manage their mana correctly, it's not really going to impact them that much. But it's a nice welcome little buff. Removed items, so all the sight stones are gone. They've updated the items and quests. I really like the direction that they actually went with all of this. I think this is pretty good, and it does help open up, more possibility for new supports to eventually come in down the line, depending on future balance changes that get taken. So, line balance, proc on healing is reduced by 50% if the item's owner is ranged. So this is the death of Relic Shield line. I don't expect to see Relic Shield line anymore, unless there's a very, very specific purpose. So expect in solo queue all the Doran's blades and Doran shields or whatever to end up coming back. Spell Thief's Edgeline. Spell Thief's Edgeline recharge penalty now also applies on non-epic monster kill. Lockout on monster minion kill, 8 to 12 seconds. Not the end of the world for this either. So this one is a completely fair balance change. This one I think is the death of Relic Shield on ADCs and whatnot. I do think that people aren't looking at Relic Shield enough on certain top laners, though. I think that it ends up just being a better call if people actually look into what it ends up offering on certain top lane matchups. And that's something that I expect people to maybe take a look at in the future. When your top laner would end up picking up call, there might just actually be an argument to instead just actually pick up Relic Shield instead. And that's something that I haven't really been seeing too many people do. So that's pretty much it for that. Rune bugs and fixes. Aftershock gets completely changed. This is another hit to Leona that you have to look at. And we talked about Leona a while ago. She got hit multiple times. This is another hit to Shen. Damage AD ratio, 0.15 bonus attack damage. No one cares. Ability power ratio, 0.1 ability power. No one cares there. Flat resistances 20 to 70 to 120. Now, the 70 at rank 1 is pretty obnoxious because this means that if you proc it, they basically can't trade against you early on. The loss of the damage isn't that important. So when we talk about this early on, it's super big, right? So we just talked about how the damage loss obviously hits Shen. The damage loss obviously hits Leona. But in some of the ways, this actually changes it up so that, it truly does go into the utility department of things. And obviously some champions are really going to like this because it just means that you can't hurt them. No longer increases resistances by 30%. So again, it's going to depend on who is using this, who's going to be making use of it. And then just take it, case by case. But I like the direction that they're trying to go with it. I just think that, when it's affecting so many champions, you have to be really cautious with what exactly you're going to do. Grasp of the Undying. Taking advantage of the Grasp of the Undying is way easier if you're ranged, so we wanted to make sure it was less impactful on ranged champions. However, it seems like we went too far. Even champions like Gnar and Urgot don't perform well with it. Ranged healing and damage reduction, 50% to 40%. Ranged permanent health per proc, 2 to 3. This is pretty big, actually. It's not quite there for the melee, but it is still a welcome buff. Do I think that it's actually going to impact some of the champions that they're proposing would use it? No, I really don't think so. I think that other runes just outshine stuff, so that doesn't really matter that much there. It could end up popping up occasionally, maybe on Gnar, but outside of that, I don't really think so. So, Guardian cooldown increased to early levels, decreased at lace levels, shield base value and ratios increased. I think that this is still a pretty misunderstood keystone. I think this is a keystone that once people learn how to play around it, it becomes less strong. I think that basically with all keystones and runes and stuff, some things seem really broken and overpowered until people just get familiar with playing around it or playing against it, which is also why I think that in the future, Unsealed Spellbook, I think that people will actually be seeing a lot more Unsealed Spellbook in the future. Once people just get very familiar with the damage foresight, the trading, the rotations of certain matchups and lanes and stuff, I think that keystone is probably just going to pop up with a lot more frequency, especially if so many keystones just keep getting hit. It almost just incentivizes you to basically just say, hey, you know what, we can do without this, let's just make use of something that is truly busted. Okay, Glacial Augment, melee slow is up by a pretty paltry amount. Range slow 20 to 40, and now 30 to 40. Again, it's basically useless. So I don't think that I don't think the changes here are heavy enough to actually cause anyone new to start picking it up. Kleptomancy, gold value of pilfered items decreased. So this is a really big hit to Gangplank, and it's a gigantic hit to Ezreal. So again, when Ezreal got nerfed above, in addition to this change, he's still going to be picked sometimes, but it definitely impacts him. Another champion this impacts is obviously Draven, because I think in recent times everyone's been taking Klepto on him. There's a lot of champions that are affected by this, and when you don't give them anything to work with, they end up just sitting in the dust, and I think that's basically what's going to happen. Gangplank does have other runes that he can use. Obviously, as Airy, he also has Grasp of the Undying. So he'll probably end up taking those now in some matchups where he can't get away with Klepto, but obviously Gangplank is just so good with Klepto. It really, really depends on how severe these end up being. But I think that's pretty much it. Obviously the inadvertent, or the change that this impacts is also the Gangplank versus Gnar matchup, where Gnar struggles to have the same one-sided domination over him as he had about a year ago. That's pretty much that. Coup de Grace, 9 to 7%. Last Stand, 12%. Who even took this? I don't even, outside of Karthus. Gold on Kill, 25 to 20. Well, that's the end of the world. Alright. Domination, Zombie Word, duration, 60 to 180 seconds. And then I guess that's pretty much it. And then targeted spells. So, targeted spells I wanted to talk about specifically. So, expand this, you look at this. So basically, champions with spammable targeted spells like Pantheon and Cassio put opposing laners in an awkward position, fight back and draw minion aggro, or just take the punishment they hand out. Changing this mechanic will make those champions a lot more intuitive to play against, as well as easier to balance. So here's the thing. This is a really, really drastic change, but it's not as intimidating as I think a lot of people think, right? So I just want to go down the list really quick. The big candidates that this affects is going to be Annie, Akali, Katarina, Karma, Lulu, Pantheon, Ryze, Vladimir, and Cassiopeia. Every other champion here, when they cast their ability that would cause them to take aggro or something, they're likely already taking aggro, or they just took it and they're not even in a position where minion aggro is going to be important. So the champions that I just mentioned, they're the only ones that their laning phase actually changes dramatically. You could make an argument maybe for Malzahar and his Malefic Visions and Nethergrasp, especially during ganks. But everything else I think is pretty standard. Taste Their Fear, I mean, you're auto-attacking them anyway to follow up. LeBlanc, Shatter Orb, I guess that's kind of an argument, but if you're comboing with LeBlanc, you're auto-attacking as well. Lissandra, Irrelevant, we already talked about Lulu, Malphite. I mean, he goes in and out of brushes usually when he's using Seismic Shard. If he's using it to zone you when he's already ahead, then I think that you have a bigger problem. Mordekaiser, it doesn't matter if he's casting Children of the Grave inside of a minion wave. Ryze is obviously heavily impacted by this. I think that it's such a big change for him. And as I already said, I don't actually understand how Riot wants Akali to play some of the laning phases out now. I think this is just too big of a change for her. It's just super negative, and there's no reason. They're trying to bring our queen down here, but, you know, our queen will not actually feel any pain here because, again, if you're stunning them with Q, and you're often following up with a W and an auto attack, so you're taking aggro anyway, it's not the end of the world. You are going to lose out on some instances where you could just blindly Q, but there's also just going to be a lot of cases where the minion aggro that you end up generating isn't that bad. Now, the upside to this, though, is in some cases when you have your opponent pushed underneath the turret and their minions are just fighting yours, you know, as the turret's trying to kill your minions, using the spells to pull their minions out faster can actually be a pretty unique laning interaction now that you're going to be able to make use of. And I think that champions that's going to benefit a lot are actually going to be Annie, Katarina, Malzahar, or Cassio, if, you know, for some reason you're able to have them underneath the turret. It's going to be really good on Malzahar, who can't cast his W when your turret's in range because you can just kill his voidlings really quick. But if he can put a Malefic Vision on you and run away from the turret and drag some minions with him and start getting his voidlings out or his Malefic Visions or whatever to follow up a little bit quicker and restart the push, then I think that's fine. Ryze can obviously benefit from that instance as well, but everything else I think is for the most part pretty okay. Health bar update, scoreboard, champ select, all these things don't really matter. And that's it seems, for this rundown. So to recap, I think the Echo change is okay, Evelynn change is okay, Ezreal, this change itself doesn't matter. The Klepto is going to be the big question mark. Jinx change is interesting, especially because I think there's a lot of champions that aren't getting the credit that they deserve. Kha'zix, this change is irrelevant. Malzahar, sad to see, but it's not going to take him out of his status. Nunu's back. Ornn feels bad. Pantheon, not really going to do anything. Sona, not really going to do anything. Vayne, I think the change actually wasn't... I think the change is too extreme, and that's pretty much it. So, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys for patch 8.3.